When I first got introduced to recovery, I stayed in recovery. I have not relapsed, and there was really nothing keeping me from getting or staying clean and sober. I wanted a change. I didn't know if it was going to be for the rest of my life, but I knew that I needed to drastically change things.
It's time for the Share Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host, O.
Okay, folks, today we have Laura Silverman joining us on the Share Podcast, the founder of the Sobriety Collective and the host of the Bad Story Podcast. You're in for a real treat, guys, because she is hysterical. It's a really funny episode. I think you guys are going to love it. The Sobriety Collective is a community of awesome, sober people making contributions in music, film, comedy, and much more. The website is www.thesobrietycollective.com, and she's also the host of the Bad Story Podcast, where she covers all kinds of topics like addiction, sobriety, OCD, ADD, and she's got a funny, quirky way of carrying the message. But before we jump into Laura's story, let's do a little Share Podcast news. Sober Nation Podcast. Just a quick reminder to go and check out Sober Nation's brand new Sober Podcasts featuring That Sober Guy, WWA, Wrestling with Addiction, The Recovery Elevator, and yours truly, the Share Podcast. And if you're listening on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, then please leave us a rating and review. This is the best way to show your support. 5-star rating for the Share Podcasts. If you don't know how to leave a rating and review, go to YouTube, type in, "How do I leave a rating and review" on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, and 55,000 results will come up. It's easy, and it's the best way to show your support. Next, I am grateful and overwhelmed at the same time. Guys, I've got episodes recorded and scheduled to launch over the course of the next 3 months. We're talking all the way to March 1st. And next year, I already have a list of 9 people that want to be on the Share Podcast and share their story. So I'm getting a lot of emails from people that want to share their story. So eventually I might have to go to 2 podcasts per week, but I just can't commit to it right now. It takes a tremendous amount of work to edit and launch a podcast once a week, much less 2. But HP, baby, I mean, I am so grateful for all the outpouring of love and the raving fans the Share Podcast now has. God has truly blessed me with an amazing gift. So thank you guys, seriously. I really appreciate all the love and unbelievable feedback that I get. It keeps me pumped and excited every time I do an interview. And the reason why I wanted to mention this is just because I feel so bad when I have to tell somebody that I'm not doing interviews until next year. It's almost like, oh, wow, look at him. He's so special. I'm not that special. I'm just fucking booked solid. It's crazy. So I got to turn this over. I got to turn this over to the God of my understanding and do the best that I can. I want to hear all your stories. I want to get them all recorded. And as soon as I can, I will do my best to start doubling up on the episodes per week because, my God, the outpouring is crazy. So thank you guys. Seriously, the support is overwhelming. Again, I also want to give a shout out to all the listeners that have donated to the Share Podcast. Louis, Susan, Mark, and most recently, Fanina sent me a message that she was having trouble with the donation page. When she clicked on the donate button, it gave her some weird page in a weird language. So in case you've had any problems, please email me, at the Share Podcast. We'll get it straightened out. And again, guys, thanks so much for your donations. They're absolutely appreciated and needed. And real quick, a funny story. So Fanina and I are going back and forth via email trying to figure out this whole PayPal donation issue. And on her last email, she writes, "You know what's interesting? For every problem, there's a solution. Lol." It fucking cracked me up. I mean, here's somebody with 90 days who's talking like someone who's got 10 years. And the best part is that by the grace of God, there's a few hundred people that helped Fanina make those 90 days. And not just white knuckling it. She made it happy, joyous, and free, all with the help of the Recovery Elevator private accountability group, the Sharing Helps Addicts in Recovery private group, and the Sober Recovery and Beyond group that now features a Blab online recovery meeting every Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. There's literally recovery 24/7 on Facebook. So now a quick message from our sponsor, and then we're jumping into Laura's story. Sober Nation is the largest online recovery community and treatment resource center. They provide treatment resources to those struggling with addiction, as well as to the family members who are caught in the crossfire. On top of that, Sober Nation is a huge community of good people who share their experience with each other. They have informative content, recovery and addiction news, as well as an entire clothing line which helps expand the culture of recovery. They can easily be found at www.sobernation.com. Sober Nation is putting recovery on the map. Now back to the show.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, O. How's it going?
It's going fantastic. And yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, let's get started then.
Okay.
So, folks, today we have a special guest, Laura Silverman, joining us on the Share Podcast, the host of the Bad Story Podcast. So, Laura, let's dive right in. Tell us about how your life is today, your hobbies, exercise. Take us into your normal daily routine, including recovery, and tell us about the Bad Story Podcast.
Well, yeah, okay. Let's just get started then. My life today, well, I've been sober for 8 years. And I think you ask later on what my sobriety date is.
I will.
Yeah, just what I'm trying to say is that I don't necessarily think about sobriety on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it's just kind of second nature for me. So, shoot, I feel nervous. It's okay. No, just go with this. Yeah, my life, I mean, I have a job. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. And my family lives nearby as well. Hobbies, I play guitar, not very well, but I play guitar, I sing, I love karaoke, and I'm usually one of the only sober karaoke people because everyone else is usually pretty drunk during karaoke.
Right.
But, yeah, I'm kind of craft nerd. I like to knit and cross stitch and stuff. I just came back from a jog, so I do like to exercise. In terms of just recovery on a daily basis, well, this year has been probably my most concentrated year in a long time in terms of recovery in my life on a daily basis, because this is the year that I started the Sobriety Collective, which is my website. It's a blog resource, sort of a house for many things, but it's a way to celebrate recovery in all its forms, and it's kind of geared towards creative people, so writers, artists, musicians, photographers, just anybody who's creative who is also sober. So the Bad Story Podcast actually comes out of the Since Right Now podcast network, and that's run by Chris of Clean and Sober on Twitter. So I'm actually in his podcast network. This month I've been slacking. I actually haven't recorded since late September. A lot of stuff has been going on in my life personally, which I can get into or not. But I've had to sort of take a break from that. But I'm going to record my third episode this week, so probably tomorrow.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Yes.
We want to hear all about it, Laura.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Well, Laura, tell us a little bit about how you maintain your spiritual condition, that conscious contact with a higher power.
So my story, which I will get into later, the nutshell version is that I've been in AA and I've not been in AA. I've done things a variety of ways, and right now, sort of the way that I feel connected to something bigger than myself is when I'm in nature. when I'm experiencing the vastness of the beauty of the earth. Sounds so like hippie and just kind of new wave, new age, woo woo stuff. But I mean, that's where I feel connected. And I don't pray. I don't have what a lot of people call quote unquote conscious contact with a higher power. That's something that I'm still sort of working to or not, but I'm happy overall right now. So I don't claim to know if there's anything out there, but I know that it's not just me. So I take sort of a spiritual connection or get a spiritual connection rather in people and family and friends and just everybody, and nature is the biggest thing for me. So that's my rambly answer.
That's perfect. All right. And how much clean time do you have, and when is your anniversary date?
So my sobriety date or sobriety birthday is July 14th, 2007, which makes it a little over 8 years now.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. It's a lot of time.
Well, yes, and it's a lot of time, and then it's also one day at a time, right?
It's always, we only have a daily reprieve. Yes, I agree. We can screw it up real fast.
Yeah.
So, Laura, let's talk a little bit about the first time you drank or used drugs, and more importantly, how they made you feel.
Okay. Well, alcohol was really the drug of choice, or as I've heard of, not choice in my story. I've tried pot a couple times in college, but it wasn't for me. So alcohol is really the only part of my story. And I think the first time I tried anything was like in middle school, and a friend of mine I thought she had like Coke in a bottle, and it turns out it was rum and Coke. So that kind of took me by surprise because I wasn't expecting that. But the first time I sought out drinking or trying it, I was exercising my rebellion in high school, but I was really a good kid. I was very much a goody two-shoes, and my parents raised me very well, and they taught me right from wrong, and they also taught me to think for myself and exercise good judgment. So it wasn't like they were so strict and didn't let me do anything, but even though they raised me well, and I knew probably that I shouldn't be going out and drinking underage, I wanted to. So it was the summer before my senior year of high school, and that's when I tried beer for the first time. I think I got drunk off of like a beer and a half. And let me tell you, it's the same story for so many of us, but I felt like whatever was missing before. I have anxiety, I have panic attacks, I have OCD, and my mind is always an ADD. It's always going a mile a minute, and sometimes it just feels like it's stuck, like my brain is locked. And so all that was going on back in high school, but I didn't have the vocabulary to express that. So when I first drank, and felt sort of the effects of that tipsiness, I felt like, this was the answer. I have to do this more. I have to feel cool. I felt cool because I was constantly bullied as a kid.
Yeah.
And even into high school, I was teased a lot. So I suddenly felt more popular and looser, and I didn't really drink again until my high school graduation, but that was the first time that I drank, and I really liked it right away. I loved it.
Yeah, I wish I could say that your story was unique, but no.
Yeah. I know.
I remember that first beer, and it was like heaven on earth.
Yeah, it's not the taste. It's not the taste. It's the effect.
God, no. Ugh, I hated it at first. So, Laura, you're all warmed up. So it's time for me to turn this show over to you. It's time for you to share your story, the battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and finally your journey into recovery up until today. So, Laura, take it away.
Thank you. Oh. Wow. Okay. Well, I hope someone's still listening. But
you're killing me.
And I will say and laugh at myself a lot. But so my story, well, like I said, it's not that unique, but in a way it is unique because there's only one me. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But like I said, the first time I tried alcohol willingly was when I was 17. But it really didn't start until I was in college, and I don't remember all the details, mostly because it was like 14 or 15 years ago, but
Right.
also because I probably drank away some of those brain cells too. But I started drinking because, and it wasn't so much peer pressure. I mean, it was in a way, but it was also because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to shed the identity of being the nerdy girl, the one who was anxious and the one who was teased mercilessly. Elementary school, middle school was especially rough, and even high school. So I just wanted to assert my newfound identity, and drinking really let me do that. I mean, everyone around me was doing it, and I mean, as it turns out, not everyone in college drinks that heavily, but I just happened to find a crowd of kids who were going out to the frat parties on weekends and going out to bars. I think we had fake IDs. I felt really terrible about that, but yeah. So, and for me, I was really only a weekend drinker, and sometimes even just one night on the weekend. I didn't let it interfere with my schoolwork. I went to the University of Virginia, and it was challenging. I got a top-notch education, and I worked hard. So I worked hard, and I played hard, and I would definitely go hard on the weekends. And as most of our stories go, our tolerances tend to build up, and quote unquote disease progresses, and so we drink more and more. I started out mostly just with beer, like Natty Light or something awful like that at frat parties.
What was it?
Natty Light, like natural light.
Oh,
Terrible,
horrible,
like pee. Basically, what pee would taste like if but it worked, and it was fun, and did keg stands and beer pongs and all that fun stuff. Yeah, but then we started to incorporate a little bit of hard liquor. We would pregame with shots of Aristocrat and awful stuff like that. So I don't remember at what point things kind of really picked up, but I think throughout college it was mostly just weekend drinking, and I would really, really go hard. It was hard for me to identify that if I had any kind of a problem at all in college, because most of my peers were drinking to excess like I was, for starters.
Right.
And I didn't really get sick very much. I rarely threw up when I drank, but I did start to have brownouts and blackouts, and I don't mean passing out, but I mean like straight up blacking out. So like there would be a couple of hours of the night, or maybe more, that I just didn't remember at all. And I'd have to ask people what I did the night before. Sometimes they would play me voicemails that I had left them, and they were just gibberish. And so as our stories go, and mine in particular, it started out as fun. I had a lot of fun drinking. I mean, I felt cool, which is just like blah, cliche after cliche, but I felt cool. I was able to just kind of let go of all the mental anguish that I had going on with the OCD, with the anxiety, with having panic attacks. And I mean, I was self-medicating for my anxiety, not knowing it, because I hadn't seen a psychiatrist up to that point, and I didn't know that I had anxiety or panic attacks or obsessive compulsive disorder. I figured I was the only person on the planet that had weird ass obsessive thoughts, intrusive thoughts, and had compulsions that I needed to do to feel okay. That was until I took a Psych 101 class and read about it in the textbook, and then I was like, oh my God, there are other people, and I feel like, I mean, I still had OCD, but I was like, I'm not alone, and there's actually a condition. Yeah, so in college, I started to have fun with problems, so I would start losing things, phones, cameras, making some not so wise decisions, like going home with different guys. I did, this was sort of a source of pride for me, but I did maintain my virginity all throughout college.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I
This is
would
a
do
first.
I would do just about everything, but I was like, I'm not having sex. No. And then there would be some instances where I would ask the next morning. I was like, did we have sex? Because I just put myself in situations that I should not have been in. I made myself totally. I was irresponsible, but I made other people be accountable for my actions, and that's not fair, and that's not how it should be. But that's what it was. So yeah, fun with problems, and you guess what's next? Okay, well, I'll tell you. Just problems, right? So
I'm just thinking, when's the sex coming into the picture?
Oh, well, I'm not telling you saucy, naughty, juicy details of my life, but
I'm sorry.
But
I'm still stuck on the virgin part through college.
I know, crazy, right? Trust me, there's other things that can be done.
Oh my god. But
okay. Yeah. So, and I'm glossing over a lot, but basically, I had fun. I was the life of the party. I definitely was a party girl, and I didn't join a sorority, but the ironic thing is that I hung out with all sorority girls and all fraternity guys. My friends were all in frats and sororities. I was sort of the independent type, but I went to a lot of Greek parties and partied hard. And then, like I said, I had fun with problems, so I started losing stuff, started making choices that weren't responsible, and all along, I was still doing well in school. I wasn't letting drinking get in the way of my studies. I graduated in 2005. I have a degree in sociology and a minor in Spanish. And that's when the problems really started. So for me, that's when my drinking really took off. I was 22. I just moved to DC. And a lot of my friends, even though we were still pretty young, they were going out to happy hours, and we were still going out and drinking, but they had somehow managed to tone it down a little bit. And I don't mean like right away, but I in hindsight, I saw it as a gradual process that my friends were kind of cutting back the amount that they were drinking, and I was going the opposite way, and I was drinking even more. And in October of 2005, I went to Charlottesville, which is the town where my alma mater is, for a concert, a Jason Mraz concert, and he was my absolute favorite musician at the time. And that was when I was hospitalized for the first time for alcohol poisoning. Yes, hospitalized for alcohol poisoning.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Don't remember much of that, and all I remember was when I was released from the hospital. And I really don't know all the details because I was blacked out, but I was so terrified of what I did, what I said, now when I say I was hospitalized, my stomach wasn't pumped. It wasn't like that, but I had to be monitored because I was not really responsive, and there was no other sort of safe place for me other than a hospital. And I'll tell you, I remember it now. It's just bits and pieces, but that was the first time I was kicked out of a bar. I was kicked out of a bar, one of the most raucous, Irish bars in town, and I was kicked out of it. And I was sprawled on the sidewalk. I hate to joke about it like this, but I was sprawled out on the sidewalk in front of a bar like a homeless person. I don't know how it happened, but someone called 911 and called an ambulance for me. So like I said, I went back to Charlottesville for this concert. We were drinking all throughout the concert. Then after the concert, we went to a house party, and I drank half a bottle of Malibu.
Oh God.
Yeah, and I don't know how much I drank at the bar after we pre-gamed. It was just nonsense, complete idiocracy. That's the word, right? I know it's a movie, Idiocracy. Anyway, it was just insanity is what it was, and I didn't eat very much that that day either. That was another issue. I think I had like a bagel and, a sandwich for the whole day, and that's not enough, especially when you're drinking like a bar's worth of booze.
Right.
But so yeah, needless to say, that should have been a wake-up call. I mean, for a normal person, you get hospitalized for alcohol poisoning, you cut back on your drinking, you quit drinking, you do something, right?
Correct.
So I tried actually to cut back because I was genuinely afraid of where my life was going, and I'd had a lot of little scares in college, like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, or oh my God, this almost happened, and it didn't. But this was the first time that I was like, oh, this is awful. And I was very lucky and fortunate too that nothing more happened than that. But I had to pay for my doctor's bill, for the emergency room bill, for the ambulance bill, and those went into collections because I was in absolute denial over it. I finally paid them off, I think, like 6 months to a year after I was billed in the first place. But okay, so like I said, that was my first hospitalization. I cut back a little bit after that, but I basically got right back into drinking again, because I wasn't at the point where I was ready, or I don't know. I was like, let me see if I can just cut back a little bit, because I shouldn't, ever drink to this point again. But I don't know at what point in time I got back to where I was and beyond, because before I knew it, I was back to, I was a member of a wine club, and what that consisted of was me getting like these quarterly shipments of wine and basically pouring. I had this huge wine glass, and so I would fill it to the very, very brim, and I was like, it's a glass of wine. I'm having a glass of wine. I would basically pour the whole bottle into a glass and call it a glass of wine. Scroll through the phone and see who I could text, see who I could call. I'd feel that like warm tipsiness, and just, that's what I strove for. I strove for the tipsiness, but the problem is, for me, for so many of us, that once I started drinking, I didn't know if I could stop or when I would stop. I didn't know how much I would drink, and I didn't know which way the night would go. If I would have a glass of wine or a couple of margaritas with fajitas with friends or whatever, or if I would be hospitalized again, or if I would go home with a random person, or worse, invite a random person to my house, that kind of thing. And that had happened. So where am I? So
you were inviting random people to your house.
Yeah. Yes, basically. So, and there were instances where I lost my keys. I had lied to my parents and my family, saying that I was robbed, because I basically threw my purse in the bushes somewhere in DC and didn't know how I got home that night. I had to like not bribe, but I practically like seduced a taxi driver to drive me home. But then I didn't have the keys to get in the house. It sounds funny in hindsight, but it was terrifying and just disgusting behavior on my part, but also disgusting behavior on other people's part for taking advantage of me in that state. So a lot of stuff like that. And so my life was continuing to kind of go in this downward spiral. It was not as bad as some stories I've heard, but definitely bad enough for me. So that kind of led me to, I'm going to fast forward through some stuff because I know we've got more things to cover, but I'm just going to...
Take your time, sweetheart. We're good. We're good. We are good. I love your story.
Do people listen though?
What's that?
I guess so. I was asking, do people listen? Will they actually listen? Are you listening? Are you out there?
There's a few thousand that will be listening.
What? No, stop. Okay, well, anyway... So yeah, some other stuff happened, or as you would say, shit.
Shit happens. It certainly does.
Shit happens. I don't know if there are any juicy stories that I can remember off the top. I know there are, but I didn't come prepared with, anecdote A, B, and C. What I will tell you is that set of behaviors and the way that I drank continued only in the course of 2 years, because that was the from my first hospitalization to my second hospitalization. So I had big plans to go to New York City for the first time in my life to see this band called Dispatch. And they were like the most famous, the biggest indie band of the time. Like it was in 2007 that I went, and they were a big college band. And so they sold like absolutely thousands and thousands of records without ever having a record deal, that kind of thing. So they sold out Madison Square Garden. And that's where the concert was. And I went up to New York City with a coworker of mine who, I was buddies with. We were friends, not close friends, but I thought that he would, keep an eye on me and, help me be accountable for myself. And the general plan, as I remember it, was that we were going to go to this concert, drop our stuff off at his friend's place first, go to Madison Square Garden, and then take a cab back to the place so that I could then take a cab to my cousin's place. I was supposed to be staying with my cousin. I mean, that probably wasn't the best hatched plan in the first place, but that was the plan. It didn't go according to plan. Spoiler. It did not go according to plan at all, because what happened was we were drinking on the bus on the way up to New York, little airplane bottles that we got at the ABC store. I don't know what they have like across the United States in terms of liquor stores, but it's a liquor store. And we continued that when we got there. We pre-gamed at his friend's house. They were doing some illegal drugs that I had never seen before in my life. I was a little shocked even. I mean, I still felt like a goody-goody. Here I am, binge drinking, going to excess, and I feel like I'm still, Miss Susie Sunshine. Well, and that should have been an indication that this guy probably shouldn't be my babysitter for the night. But I wasn't exactly in my right mind myself. So we carried the party on. We went to a restaurant where we had like our first food items of the day. I don't know what I had, but it wasn't enough to, soak everything up, because when we got to the venue, we drank more and more and more and more. And then the next thing I know, a light is shining on my head. It's a police officer with a flashlight telling me would I kindly remove myself from this gentleman's lap. Oh. And I was like, what? How did that happen?
Oh my God.
So what happened is that I was browning out, because I remember little bits and pieces. So it wasn't a full blackout, but there are hours that I have completely lost. And the next thing I know, I came to, I guess, I was running around the lobby of Madison Square Garden. I don't know if you're familiar with it or if your listeners are, but it's a big venue. It's not a tiny little thing. That's where it's where like the basketball team plays, and 100,000 people. No, well, I'm guessing like 50,000 people can easily get in there. I don't know. It was a big venue.
Yes.
So I'm running around. I don't have my shoes. I don't have my purse. As a matter of fact, I think I had one flip-flop on, and I'm crying. I was just completely like, what am I doing? Where am I? Who am I? Just not knowing anything, and wondering where my so-called friends were, because they weren't with me. The next thing I remember, I am outside of the venue, and I mean, I sound like I'm exaggerating, but I swear to God I'm not. This is what happened, because this, as you'll come to find out, this is the experience that changed me. So I'm outside of the venue, crying again. I don't have anything with me. I get random passerby to just stop and attempt to help me, because I figured, oh, this is smart. I don't have my phone. Let's have someone call my phone to see if someone answers it. But nothing was coming out of my mouth that was coherent. It wasn't in English. It was drunk babble. Yeah, well, somehow I got someone to call my phone, and it was going to like voicemail, or it was busy. So I remember there were some security guards or like police officers just kind of there, but I don't know at what point they called an ambulance, but they did. And an ambulance came, and I asked because they were like, okay, young lady, we're going to have, they basically were escorting me, but I didn't understand. I was like, why did you call an ambulance? And again, I could barely be understood. They're like, this is the only safe place for you. We don't know who you are, where you're. I mean, I had no ID on me. I had nothing. So they had to carry me into the ambulance, and then I completely blacked out for the next like 8 hours. I woke up, it was like 7 or 8 in the morning in the hospital, and I was still drunk when I woke up. I mean, I wasn't wasted, but I definitely still didn't have my wits about me, and I was really, probably for the first time, like absolutely terrified. I didn't understand how I got myself there and what was wrong, or why did I let this happen, or how did this happen? All the questions that people in our situation would ask themselves.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first thing was like, how was I going to reunite with my cousin? I didn't know her phone number off the top of my head, and this was before the days of social media, so there was no way I could just tweet to her or like Facebook her. I mean, Facebook was around, but it was only in its infancy. So, I mean, there's just no way. And of course, I didn't have any phone with me. I mean, I didn't have anything. I mean, I think we even looked up her hospital records to see if she was in the New York City system. Because I was like, how can we contact her? Well, long story short, there was no way I could find her phone number. So I called the only number that had not changed my entire life, and that was my grandma Shirley. I called her, and I had to lie to her. I knew at the time that it was wrong of me to do so, but I didn't have any other choice. I didn't know how. I didn't know my parents' phone numbers. They had just moved back to the States from living abroad. I didn't know my brother's cell phone number. I didn't know my best friend's cell phone number because, you know, in a cell phone, you just have it in your phone. You just scroll down to the number you need and boom. So I lied to my grandma and told her I'd arrived late and, you know, I couldn't find my cousin's information or whatever. And I had her give it to me. And I felt terribly guilty. I mean, it's just awful. But I needed her help, and she did, and she helped me, and I got reunited with my cousin, who was livid. She was so mad because she was so scared. I mean, the whole family had been scrambling all night to try to track me down, to try to find me. Because what had happened while I was blacked out, passed out on a hospital bed, was that somehow someone at Madison Square Garden turned my purse in to a security guard, and everything was intact. My phone, my inhaler, which I had because I thought I was asthmatic, but it was really just panic and anxiety.
Oh my God, I love it.
I had my bus ticket back to DC. I had my keys to my apartment, or to the house that I shared with some of my friends. Everything was still there. Everything was still there. And so what they did, there was still some juice left on my phone. They called the most recent numbers in the call list, which were my mom and my cousin. And they tried to track me down that way, like, ma'am, we have your daughter's belongings, but we don't know where she is. Do you have any idea where she is, or that kind of thing? Yeah. I mean, I've made amends to my parents. I mean, we have an amazing relationship now, but I have no idea what kind of fear they felt that night. I could have been dead.
Yeah.
Or anything, really. But I think dead's probably the worst. God, sounds awful. I'm sorry. But yeah. So
terrifying.
It was terrifying for them and for me too, but not knowing what I was putting them through. So when my cousin basically told me what happened, I had wave after wave of anxiety just wash over me. I mean, I had panic before, but that was, what do you call it? Like baby,
that was baby
like
anxiety.
Yeah. Sandbox anxiety. I mean, this was like full-fledged, you know, Guantanamo Bay style anxiety.
That's a great way to paint it.
Yeah. I mean, it was bad. Well, so she didn't want to leave me alone, even though the only thing I wanted to do was just be in her apartment and cry and just go in the fetal position until I had to go back the next day to DC, because that's when my bus ticket was for. We went out with her friends to dinner, and she's like, look, you can drink tonight. I'm not your parents. I'm not going to tell your parents, but just watch what you're doing, because you can't do that again. And that night, I said, I don't want to drink. I don't think I ever want to drink again. And somehow, some way, I actually meant it. I mean, yeah, that was my moment of clarity, some sort of spiritual experience without being able to, yeah, that was my awakening. I was absolutely convinced that I couldn't drink again because I just, once alcohol was in me, that was the end.
Yeah.
So the next day I went back to DC. I had my bus ticket. Like I said, everything was still intact. And I got back to my place. And I mean, I was just out of sorts. I felt like I was in an out-of-body experience. I didn't know. I was just thinking about it now. It's just like awful. I just felt so lost. And so I called my work and I was like, I'm going through something right now, like a family crisis or something. I need to take some time off. So I took 3 days off only, but it was what I could do. And so I knew I had a problem. I mean, I was still in denial about a lot, but I knew that on the back of my health insurance card, there was a number for like substance abuse and mental health services, or what they call behavioral health services. Anyway, I called that number and I told them what was going on. And they're like, you should come in and make an appointment with a substance abuse counselor. So I did, I think that same day. And she had me go through the checklist, like the Are You an Alcoholic checklist. And I answered yes to basically everything.
Right.
And then I was like, well, I don't think I'm an alcoholic. She was like, wait, what? But you answered yes to like everything. She's like, look, I can't tell you if you're an alcoholic or not, but what I can tell you is I think you would be a good candidate for my group counseling program. So she had this intensive outpatient program in a group setting through my health insurance provider. And she's like, I can't make the decision for you. It's up to you, but I think you would be a good candidate for this. I said, I mean, what the hell? Even though I was still sort of in denial, she's like, why are you here then? You know, I mean, she was straight up with me. She was also, and I felt, it was so weird, but like I felt almost like this pressure, like I have to cry. I have to show that I'm serious about this. Like, I don't know. It felt really contrived. I think I kind of forced myself to cry, but regardless, the emotions were very real, and I knew that I needed to change something, whether or not I thought it was going to be for forever. I certainly didn't know that, but I knew that I couldn't continue the way things were going. So that was sort of the beginning of my journey in recovery. And I started that program, and it was a 5-week, 3 times a week, 2-hour sessions a pop, coupled with 15 hours of Alcoholics Anonymous. And once I did that, I would graduate and, be eligible to do aftercare or whatever. Yeah, and so that's how I got started, and slowly, and by the way, every time it was very, not dehumanizing, but I mean just humiliating, because we had to be breathalyzed at every session. And I'm sure there were some people who blew something, but I never knew what happened to them. I just know that I didn't. I started to sort of develop a little bit of pride that my sobriety date remained the same week after week, where some of the people in my cohort, they kept changing because they would go to a barbecue over the weekend. They're like, I just couldn't stay away. And, there was beer there, or there was weed there, and I just couldn't say no. But I was serious about it. I was like, I can't mess this up. This is my chance. And I mean, it wasn't glitzy. It wasn't an expensive rehab. I think I only paid a copay each time, and that was like $10 or $15. So, I mean, for me, as a young person with not a great salary at the time, it was still something I had to pay for, but it was basically free in a way. So, yeah, so I had to go to AA. I had to get there was no two ways around it. I was forced into it because that was part of the program.
Right.
And I had to get the paper signed, and if I didn't get the paper signed, it means that I didn't go, and then I'd have to go again, kind of thing. So I went. That was 15 hours means 15 different meetings. So I went to 15 different meetings, and I credit the program for really helping me in the beginning. I mean, I needed the structure. I needed to be around other sober people because I didn't know anyone who either was going through what I was going through or had gone through and actually had some sort of length of sobriety, any sort of life in recovery. I mean, I just didn't know that any of that existed. So I needed that. And I went basically for the first 6 months to a year pretty regularly. I tried to get a sponsor, but no one was really driving with me, or vice versa. So I just went to the meetings, and I worked steps in my own way, but I wasn't formally working through the steps with a sponsor. Anyway, after the first year, I just didn't feel like it was for me anymore. And I wasn't like, okay, it's been a year, I'm out of here. But it just kind of happened where I stopped going, and I would go my yearly anniversary, but that was it. So I went for my second year, got a chip, went for my third year, got a chip. And at my third year meeting, I was the only young person at the meeting. It was mostly old timers, and I think just all guys too. And they were like, why don't you try this young person's meeting out, and blah, 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 blah. And a lot of good people there. So I was like, okay, didn't know there were other young people in recovery or doing this. And the reason why I went back to AA for my third year, not just to get a chip, but I was starting to feel that, like, I didn't have sober friends. I didn't, I had understanding friends who have been with me through some of the really hard times and had stuck with me, but they just didn't know what it was like. And so I wanted to find a network, and that was really what drove me back to AA, because I wanted to find and I'm asking this too late, but I'm allowed to say AA, right?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Right. So some people are like, you can't say that, and other people, okay. Anyway, so I went back, and this time I was serious about it. I was like, I'm going to work the program, or however they do it. And and I asked this girl or woman in my first meeting there if she would be my temporary sponsor, because I heard her speak, and I was like, I really like what you had to say, and will you be my temporary sponsor, kind of thing. And she ended up being my full-time sponsor. I worked with her for a year and a half. She walked me through all the steps. I did the Searching Fearless Moral Inventory. I made amends to just about everybody I could make amends to. I had service positions in my home group and in another group that I was in. I mean, I took it very seriously, and I really, really liked it and enjoyed it for the time that I was there. But at some point, it just started to feel like it was too much for me. Like AA had become my drug or something. Like it was just starting to take over my life. And it was also starting to feel for me, it was starting to feel cult-like. And I don't know if it's the area that I live in or what, but people were all up in my grill.
Yeah.
Where have you been? We haven't seen you in a week. I'm like, or 2 weeks, or, then it started to be a couple months would go by, and then I would show up again. Are you still sober? I was like, yeah, I don't need this. I mean, I want to be here, but I don't need this. Yeah. And that's hard for a lot of people to understand. They need the structure of a 12-step program to stay sober. I don't fault anyone for that, but that's not what I need. I wanted AA to be part of my toolbox, but it didn't need to be the toolbox.
Right.
And as time wore on, I felt like people were just too, intense for me. And I didn't like all the parts of the program anyway. I mean, it was very white male Christian. I tried to, separate the language and make things more modern in my mind, but it stopped working for me, to be honest. And I was really scared of leaving because I didn't know. I mean, I was told that if you don't do AA, you're a white-knuckling, dry drunk. You're not sober if you're not in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
Well, the big book says that they don't have a monopoly on recovery, but they also say that there are those, unfortunates who just don't get it like we do, and if they go out there and even if they're not drinking, they're not what we are. Well, you know what? I do have a life in recovery, and I did make a lot of positive changes in my life. I mean, I have a therapist. I have supportive relationships with my friends and my family. I take medication for my anxiety, and I not like Xanax or anything, but an antidepressant to keep my anxiety level at bay. I mean, I read a lot of books, recovery memoirs, self-help books for mental wellness. Exercise is big for me. I mean, I changed my life, so I feel that it's only up to me to decide who says if I'm sober or not, or who says I'm in recovery or not. I mean, I haven't drank in 8 years, and I'm getting a little defensive because I felt like the program was putting me on the defensive. By the way, though, I have nothing against AA because it's part of my story. It helped me tremendously, and I don't regret any of it. But it's not my full story. So that's basically it. I mean, I started the Sobriety Collective this year because, again, I was coming up on 8 years and feeling sort of the same feeling I felt when I was coming up on 3 years. Like, I need the connection to other sober people. I need to know that I'm not alone in this. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I never bothered to look online to see if there were any other recovery sites or anything. I mean, I knew about thefix.com. I'd been on the Fix, but I thought that was it. And I liked the Fix, but I honestly thought that was it. So I was like, I've got this great idea. I'm gonna make this website where it's gonna be like for creative people in recovery, and I was like, I'm gonna be someone, or make a legitimate contribution to recovery, and I pitched the idea to a couple of friends of mine, a couple of online friends that I had made over the years who were also in recovery, and they're like, that sounds really great. You know that sites X, Y, and Z exist, right? I'm like, what? Really? I almost didn't go forward with it because I was like, who's going to want to see another website that says the same thing? And little did I know, but sharing recovery stories is the common currency of all these recovery websites. But I was like, people are going to get to share their recovery stories. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, so that already exists everywhere. But my voice wasn't out there. And what I had to bring to the table personally wasn't out there. So I was like, you know what? I have nothing to lose. It could just completely go, or it could be great. Let me give it a try. So in April, I launched my blog, which looked very, very web 1.0. And about a month later, I totally gave it a site revamp, and I started really getting into it. And things sort of culminated for the year anyway in October. And in my hometown of DC, a lot of people came for Unite to Face Addiction. And I met so many of these amazing people that I'd been friends with online, but I finally met them in person. Yeah, and then I started my podcast. I mean, things have really been wonderful in a lot of ways. But tough times still happen in recovery. And I mean, my grandma passed away while I was in recovery, and I'm actually going through a breakup right now.
The boyfriend?
Yeah.
That's what you were going through this week?
Yeah. Well, it's been coming for a while, but yeah. So I don't know if you had a chance to read it, or but I wrote a piece on my blog about what it's been like, and it's a good way to process my feelings, but it's actually it's a mutual, amicable decision. There's no hard feelings at all, but it's just been very difficult. And again, I mean, I don't even think about drinking. It's just not there anymore. Thank God. Now it's just I mean, there's so many AA platitudes that are just true, even though I want to just, scream, but life on life's terms, right?
Yes,
So
the Serenity Prayer.
Exactly. I mean, deal with life. It's going to have its ups and downs. If it was all up the whole time, you wouldn't be able to appreciate the up for what it is without having it down. So, yeah, that's my story.
Oh, wow, Laura, that's That's a great story. And, really, thank you so much for opening up and, telling us about what you're feeling. What's funny is, for those of you listening, hopefully most of you didn't hear the Rule 62 podcast episode I put out. But so many of you did. I saw the download numbers. And I'm going to do a Rule 62 episode 2 because I'm going to read all the emails that my listeners sent back to me because I got some great feedback. And I listened. And the thing is that there was, for the ranting that I did, there's other people out there that want to rant as well. And they're tired. And they are kind of pushing against the seams like you. Again, when I listened to your podcast, it was very funny. I related a lot to it because of, my own ADD and my own OCD. And so I can totally relate to what you were saying and how you were saying it and what you were doing throughout the podcast to keep you on track. And so I think that's what cracked me up the most. But just like what you were sharing about in your own podcast is the same thing that we do for the rest of the other podcasts. We're sharing our stories so that those that can relate to us go, aha, there's somebody else that's just like me, going through exactly what I'm going through. And this is what she did. Okay. And so this is what, what can I do or how can I create the recovery plan that works for me? And I think that's what's a lot more easily accessible now that social media and the internet have made it so available. So I applaud you for your efforts, Laura.
Thank you. And you know what? I'm glad that I didn't do my full due diligence because if I had, I might have been swayed one way or the other. And this way, I had my idea, I executed it, and I joined the masses.
Again, you're just like me. Most of the time, I just want to throw myself into the fire, okay, without checking anything because, I'm afraid that if I do any kind of research whatsoever, first of all, I'm too lazy to do it. Second of all, I'm worried that I'm going to talk myself out of it. So you just got to, just do it. Laura, let's start closing up here because I remember at the beginning of this interview you said, I can't talk 45 hours.
45 minutes. But I guess I could talk for 45 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So let's close this puppy up.
All right. So what I do is I ask a couple of questions, and this is primarily for the newcomers. Okay. So I'm going to ask you some questions about your early recovery, and I want you to respond with insightful and inspiring answers you can share with our newcomers. Are you ready?
Yeah. Okay. Insightful? All right.
I love it.
Let's try.
All right. Well, number one, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
Well, the short answer is that when I first got introduced to recovery, I stayed in recovery. I have not relapsed, and there was really nothing keeping me from getting or staying clean and sober. I wanted a change. I didn't know if it was going to be for the rest of my life, but I knew that I needed to drastically change things. So fortunately, there wasn't a lot that was keeping me from staying sober.
There was no resistance.
Not really. I was at that point of desperation. Yeah. I couldn't continue the way I was going on. I was scared that I would never be able to drink again. And 24 years old, not being able to go out for drinks on dates or go to bars with my friends. But I think having a life, an actual life where I could be alive. was way more worth it to me. And this being in recovery, although I don't necessarily think I called it that at the time, I needed to just be serious about it.
Absolutely. And number two, at what point did you have a spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery, when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed the hope that you could recover? My spiritual awakening, I guess, I think it was that time in New York City. Something changed in me because I had been hospitalized for alcohol poisoning before, and nothing changed after that. But this time, I just didn't want to drink again. I felt like there was some sort of guardian angel or something cheesy like that. Some HP, right? HP, baby. Something was
watching out for me because I was unscathed from that whole debacle, except for my pride, dignity, and, you know, a couple of small bruises.
Right.
Everything. I mean, I had my purse. I mean, that had been salvaged. Everything. It just seemed like that felt somewhat spiritual to me. And I've often wondered why me? Why did that happen to me where I was okay? And then there are so many other young kids and people of all ages, but that don't make it, that overdose or, you know, drink to excess and drink themselves to death. I mean, why did it happen for me and not for other people? And, you know, I think about that a lot. You know, I knew that I couldn't drink safely. I couldn't put alcohol in my body and know predictably what the outcome was going to be. And that was definitely not my only bottom, but it was my last bottom. And I do want to say, though, I mean, for the newcomer or for someone in relatively recent recovery, the spiritual awakening term kind of put me a little bit on edge when I first heard it, and I don't necessarily love it still. I mean, I guess for me, it's just what changed in me. It doesn't, for what I'm trying to say is that the newcomer, you don't have to have, like, God shining a light down on you and, you know, I mean, it doesn't have to be that dramatic. It could just be like when you feel like you're ready to do something, to take a step forward in the right direction. It doesn't have to be like a neon sign or anything. And I just want people to know that it's okay, that it doesn't have to be this like amazing experience for the ages, you know?
Absolutely. Yes. That's a great message because it doesn't. Sometimes it's just this fleeting thought that creeps in the back of your mind and propels you to take action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. So, Laura, tell us, do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to a newcomer that you read in early recovery?
Well, funny that you ask, because I do.
Wonderful.
I have several books that I recommend, but I'm going to give the newcomer two that completely changed my life. The first is called Smashed, Story of a Drunken Girlhood by a woman named Koren, Koren, Zailckas. Her last name is spelled, I believe, Zailckas. And when I read it, I felt like I was reading my life. It was, I mean, all of the emotions behind everything. It was amazing. So that was the book in early recovery that I read that changed things for me. And then there are a couple of books that I've read since, also recovery memoirs, that have been extremely poignant and just relevant for me. But those were Unwasted, My Lush Sobriety by Sasha Zimmerman Skoblick, and more recently Blackout, Remembering the Things I Drank to Forget by Sarah Hepola. So those three memoirs are big. And Guts by Kristen Johnston, that's also a really good memoir too.
Spectacular. Thank you for those wonderful suggestions. All right, so Laura, tell us, what is the best suggestion you have ever received?
I don't know. Keep an open mind. If something works for you, go with it. If it doesn't mean that recovery isn't for you, or that, you know, life isn't for you. I mean, it doesn't just have to be recovery related, but in terms of the best recovery suggestion, just find something that does work for you and then go from there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. Great suggestions, Laura. I really appreciate you sharing your wonderful story. No, seriously.
Thanks.
You know what? Here's the thing, that because of the podcast and because of the feedback I've gotten, this is the kind of feedback and this is the kind of recovery stories that my listeners want to hear. They're constantly challenging the restrictive or the, I guess, old school mentality, and they're looking outside of that. Okay, some people are just not comfortable in 12-step fellowship for whatever reason, and so there needs to be this open-mindedness. Again, that's what this whole program is all about: is honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And so, if that's the case, then we need to be open to everything. And that's basically what your story is all about. Just be open, be open to whatever works for you. And I applaud that. And I'm looking forward to your next podcast. So let's get that out there.
Yes, I've got to do that. I was originally going to do it tonight as well, but I am zonked, so I'm going to have to do it tomorrow. But it will come out in the near future.
Wonderful. We have now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on the Share Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.thesharepodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then. The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a whole. And though we discuss 12-Step recovery and the impact it had in our lives, we do not promote or endorse any 12-Step Anonymous program.